Your patience is rewarded.
Tonight, 2 planeswalkers have been summoned to fight to the death. Both planeswalkers walk into the arena, but only one leaves with their sparks still ignited. The planeswalkers have chosen a commander to represent them and ensure their ability to lead through the blind eternities. Who will amass the greatest army and devastate the competition? Find out on Commander Duel!
Tyler plays a Field of Ruin as his opening land. WUBRG plays an island and casts Brainstorm, drawing 3 cards and putting 2 cards from his hand on top of his library. Tyler plays Forge of Heroes as his second land drop, and casts Mind Stone. WUBRG plays a forest and casts Spellskite. Tyler plays Nephalia Academy as his land for turn. He taps 4 mana to cast Joyra's Familiar. WUBRG plays a forest as his land for turn, then casts Replicating Ring. Tyler plays Urza's Power Plant as his 4th land. He taps for 5 and casts Staff of Nin, since Joyra's Familiar reduces the cost of artifacts, legendaries, and sagas by 1 mana. Tyler taps the staff to deal 1 damage to WUBRG. WUBRG adds a counter to Replicating Ring during upkeep. He plays Dismal Backwater as land for turn, which enters tapped and gains him 1 life before passing. Tyler draws an additional card during upkeep from Staff of Nin. He plays Emergence Zone as land for turn. Tyler taps for 3 mana to cast Hedron Archive. He then casts Crashing Drawbridge. He attacks WUBRG with Joyra's Familiar and deals 1 damage with Staff of Nin. WUBRG adds another counter onto Replicating Ring during upkeep. He plays a forest and passes turn. Tyler draws an additional card during upkeep. He begins the turn by casting Mana Crypt. Tyler taps 9 mana with the Joyra's Familiar discount to cast Kozilek. The spell resolves. With the Enters the Battlefield trigger on the stack, WUBRG casts Pongify to destroy Kozilek. Pongify resolves, Kozilek is destroyed, and Tyler creates a 3/3 green ape creature token. He then resolves the ETB trigger, drawing cards until his hand is equal to 7. Tyler taps Crashing Drawbridge to give his creatures haste. He attacks with the 3/3 ape token. WUBRG almost blocks with Spellskite, but after realizing Tyler can kill it by tapping Staff of Nin, he declares no blocks. Tyler taps Staff of Nin to do 1 extra damage to WUBRG. WUBRG plays a Llanowar Waste as land for turn. He taps 7 mana to cast Coma Cosmos Serpent. At the beginning of Tyler's upkeep, WUBRG creates a 3/3 Coma's Coil token, and Tyler draws an additional card from Staff of Nin. The upkeep trigger for Mana Crypt goes on the stack. Tyler loses the flip and must take 3 damage. He taps 11 mana to cast Kozilek the Great Distortion. Kozilek resolves. Tyler taps his Crashing Drawbridge to give his creatures haste. He attacks with Kozilek and Joyra's Familiar for 14 damage. Tyler then taps Staff of Nin to deal 1 extra damage. WUBRG moves to upkeep, creating another Koma's Coil token and adding a counter to Replicating Ring. WUBRG plays a forest and taps for 2 to cast Baleful Strix. The spell resolves and WUBRG draws a card. He then casts Windfall, causing each player to discard their hand and draw cards equal to the greatest amount discarded, which is 7. During Tyler's upkeep, Koma creates another Coil token. WUBRG sacrifices one of the tokens to tap Kozilek. Tyler draws an additional card during upkeep and rolls a dice for the Mana Crypt trigger. He rolls even, which is heads, and does not take 3 damage. Tyler plays an Ancient Tomb as land for turn. He taps 7 mana, losing 2 life from Ancient Tomb, to cast Bane of Bala Ged. He taps 1 mana to cast Hedron Crawler. Tyler taps Crashing Drawbridge to give his creatures haste. He taps Hedron Crawler and 5 mana to cast Spine of Ishsa, attempting to destroy Koma. In response, WUBRG sacrifices a Koma Coil token to make Koma indestructible until end of turn. WUBRG sacrifices another Coil token to tap down the Bane of Bala Ged. Tyler then taps Staff of Nin to deal 1 damage to Baleful Strix. The ability resolves and Baleful Strix is killed. WUBRG creates a Koma's Coil token and adds a counter to Replicating Ring during his upkeep. He taps for 6 mana to cast Karn's Temporal Sundering. In response, Tyler uses Kozilek's ability, discarding Dreamstone Hedron to counter the spell. With 1 mana open, WUBRG passes turn. During Tyler's upkeep, WUBRG creates a Koma's Coil token. Tyler draws an additional card from Staff of Nin, then safely rolls for Mana Crypt. Tyler plays a Waste as land for turn. He taps 2 mana to cast Paladin Mirror. Next, Tyler casts Kozilek's Channeler. He taps 2 mana and sacrifices Hedron Archive to draw 2 cards. Tyler activates the Crashing Drawbridge ability to give his creatures haste. He taps 2 mana to cast Vessel of Endless Rest, returning Ulamog's Crusher to the bottom of his library. Before his attack phase, WUBRG casts Reality Shift targeting Bane of Bala Ged. The spell resolves and Tyler manifests the top card of his library. WUBRG sacrifices a Coil token to tap down Kozilek. Tyler does not attack, but deals 1 damage to WUBRG with Staff of Nin. WUBRG creates a Coil token during his upkeep and adds a counter to Replicating Ring. He taps for 7 to cast Cyclonic Rift Overloaded, returning all non-land permanents he doesn't control to his opponent's hand. WUBRG then casts Tasigur, paying 2 mana and exiling 4 cards from his graveyard for the Delve ability. He moves to combat, attacking Tyler with Coma for 6 damage. During Tyler's upkeep, WUBRG creates a coil token. Tyler rebuilds his board by casting Mana Crypt. He then plays Mystifying Maze as land for turn. He taps for 9 mana to cast Artisan of Kozilek. The enters the battlefield effect triggers, and Tyler returns Oblivion Sower from his graveyard to the battlefield. He takes 2 damage from tapping Ancient Tomb to cast Mind Stone. Tyler pays 1 mana and sacrifices Mind Stone to draw a card. He then passes turn. WUBRG creates another coil token during upkeep and adds the 7th counter to Replicating Ring. WUBRG activates Tasigur's ability. He mills 2 cards, and Tyler chooses a non-land card of his choice to return to WUBRG's hand. Tyler gives WUBRG Diabolic Tutor. WUBRG casts Diabolic Tutor and puts a card from his library into his hand. During Tyler's upkeep, WUBRG makes a coil token. Tyler rolls odd for Mana Crypt, causing him to take 3 damage. Tyler plays a waste as a land for turn. Tyler takes 2 damage from tapping Ancient Tomb, tapping 7 mana in total to cast Spine of Ishsa, targeting Replicating Ring. WUBRG taps Replicating Ring for blue mana and redirects the ability to Spellskite. Tyler taps 6 mana to cast Kozilek's Pathfinder. Before moving to attacks, WUBRG sacrifices 2 coil tokens to tap down Oblivion Sower and Artisan of Kozilek. WUBRG takes his turn, making a coil token during upkeep and adding the 8th counter to Replicating Ring. He removes all of the counters to make 8 mana rocks. WUBRG casts Demonic Consultation, naming a card that is not in his deck. He removes the top 6 cards of his library from the game. Then reveals and removes the rest of the cards in his library from the game. WUBRG casts Thassa's Oracle, and with no cards left in his library, WUBRG wins the game.